Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now you may remember a couple of weeks ago or last week I purchased this $50 PC and I plan to do it up gradually over the course of a couple of videos. Now I wanted to do this all in one go, but it turns out that UPS haven't delivered the graphics card yet, but I do have the new processor and RAM that I plan to use in this build, so I thought why wait, why don't we just chuck it in the system now and see if it offers any performance upgrade over the stock $50 components. So let's get right into it and remove everything we need to remove in order to give this a little bit of an upgrade right now. So first of all, we have to take out the graphics card as well as unplug all of the cables and connectors to the motherboard, because the motherboard is going to have to come out of this system and you'll see why in a minute. So I had a lot of thinking to do when it came to the processor in this computer, and I decided to go with something that I have used before but I haven't used very often. Now a lot of you guys recommended a Xeon CPU and I do have one of those on the way as well, just for a later comparison video, but for now I stuck to something a little closer to home and something that I could get for a far cheaper price than an old Xeon. This was also about availability as well, and I thought that if you wanted to do a similar project at home, then buying what I bought would be a very good idea, because there's also some overclocking potential. So with the motherboard out of the case, it was time to install the new processor, but first we had to take the old Core 2 Duo E7600 out. This is a very simple process, as you probably know. Just remove the old Intel heatsink there by removing 4 of the pins that are firmly seated to the board, and then take out the old thermal paste coated dual core CPU to make room for the new one. I will give this one a good home indeed in another build, and here is the new CPU I purchased. It's a Core 2 Quad Q8300. It's more power efficient and cooler than the Q6600, but it can still be overclocked quite a bit as well, on top of its 2.5 GHz stock speed. So to install this, the process is very simple. I like to use this Noctua thermal paste because I find that it's the best at keeping my processors cool, and I decided to add this Cooler Master Hyper 103 CPU cooler into the mix as well, because it will allow for that aforementioned overclocking, and this is the CPU cooler that I used on my i5 4460. The good thing about these air coolers is that they're quite cheap, around £20 new here in the UK, and you can find them used for a lot cheaper as well. Installation is also very simple and they work with both Intel and AMD motherboards. Simply slot the 4-pin base into the motherboard there and sit the heatsink fan combo on top, screwing them in with the thumb screws. Now you can use a screwdriver for this, but I prefer to use these thumb screws, doing them up by hand, because I'm not tempted to over tighten them. If you over tighten screws, especially with something like this, then you may end up with them being threadbare, which means that the heatsink may come loose on the motherboard, and that is the last thing you want, especially when it's trying to cool a working and fairly warm processor. Another component that actually arrived today was the RAM. This is 4GB of DDR2 800MHz RAM, and I could tell that it was 4GB in 2GB modules because someone had written 2 on each individual module with Sharpie because the label had been peeled off. So RAM installation is very simple, just push it in till it clicks, and this is the same process for whether it be DDR, DDR2, DDR3 or DDR4 memory. It looks like I'm putting quite a bit of force into this, but it won't damage the motherboard whatsoever, and I'm pretty happy with our 8GB upgrade. It should give us a nice boost in games when the graphics card finally arrived. The next step was to reseat the motherboard back into the case, so let me talk to you a little bit about the graphics card that I ordered. So I want to keep it a secret until it arrives early next week, but even with the components we've upgraded already that I will still be pairing with the GT240 for now, we should still see a little bit of an upgrade thanks to the 4 cores, because the GPU wasn't actually a bottleneck across all of the games. So reinstallation of this motherboard is a pretty simple process. Just plug in all of the USB connectors. The front panel is the most complicated thing, but each motherboard has a manual that comes with it, or you can find them online, and it tells you exactly where each pin needs to go. We can finalize this process by plugging in the 2 SATA cables here, and our PC is now ready to go. Now this is the first time I turned it on camera, and I was a little upset because nothing happened. I thought perhaps I had broken one of the components, but amateur mistake, I just hadn't turned the PSU on at the back, but once I did, our system fired up into the BIOS and I could get to overclocking this Q8300 as far as it would go. I wasn't sure how far I could push it at first, but I decided to try and go above and beyond 3 GHz a little while later, and we had ended up with a 3.2 GHz CPU stable speed, which meant that when we jumped into games, there was a nice difference over the E7600 that came with the system when I bought it. As you can see here, Fallout New Vegas, BioShock Infinite and GTA 4, which will come up on your screen in a minute, all ran a lot better than they did with the dual-core CPU, and I look forward to seeing just how much of a difference the graphics card that I will be putting in this thing next week will do to this system in terms of FPS. I hope you can join me in the next video, so thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next video.